מתי יבוא שלום, מתי נחיה בשקט בו.
Welcome to Standing with Israel. I'm Rothstein, your host and CEO of Stand With Us. Today we have the pleasure of hosting the great Edwin Black, who's a brilliant author. Let me introduce him and then we'll bring him on. Edwin Black is the son of Holocaust survivors, like me. I'm a daughter of Holocaust survivors. He is also an award-winning New York Times best-selling international investigative author of 200 editions in 20 languages in 190 countries, as well as scores of newspaper and magazine articles in leading publications in the United States, Europe, and Israel. With more than 1.6 million books in print, you heard that right, 1.6 million books in print, his work focuses on human rights, genocide and hate, corporate criminality and corruption, governmental misconduct, academic fraud, philanthropy abuse, oil addiction, alternative energy, and historical investigation. Editors have submitted Black's works in 13 times for Pulitzer Prize nominations, and in recent years he has been the recipient of a series of top editorial awards. He has also contributed to a number of anthologies worldwide. So Edwin has been on a number of different shows, including the Today Show, CNN with Wolf Blitzer, and today he's on Standing with Israel with us. So I want to name the different books that you've written, and then we're going to focus on a couple. So he has 11 award-winning best-selling books, including IBM and the Holocaust. I'm sure you've heard of that one or read it. Financing the Flames, British Petroleum and the Red Line Agreement, The Farhud, Nazi Nexus, The Plan, Internal Combustion, Banking on Baghdad, War Against the Weak, The Transfer Agreement, and Format C. So welcome, Edwin Black.
Thank you very much, Roz, for having me on, and thank you, Stand With Us, for all the fine work you're doing.
Thank you, Edwin. So let's launch right in here. So what is it about you that is so incredibly interested in these topics like financing the flames and IBM and the Holocaust? Is it that you're a son of survivors?
Well, not only is that, it's the type of survivors that my parents were. You have your own story, your family's own story. Every second generation has their family's story. In the case of my family history, my mom was pushed out of a train on the way to Treblinka. She was shot by local militia on the ground, buried in a mass grave. My father came upon her. He had walked away from a shooting place. He was a partisan. He dug her out of the snow, and the two of them lived together as partisans for 2 years. And when they finally came to the United States, after waiting 2 years for a number in a displaced persons camp, I was born, and it was always been my mission to not only discover what was done, but who was responsible, who got off scot-free, and who were the wire pullers and the behind-the-scenes funders who collaborated and made it possible. And in the process of fighting for the Jewish people, I've also learned that we need to fight for all people. And that is why you see I have a diversified approach to human rights. In every way and in every sense, every man's victimization belongs to every man. And so I've been determined to go after the biggest of the criminals, whether it's IBM, Ford, General Motors, the funders, and the people who are undermining the Jewish community.
So let me say congratulations to you for all your fine work. It's pretty remarkable, and thank God you have so much energy, Edwin. I rarely meet people with the kind of passion and drive and energy and take it from start to finish like you. So I just need to say that to you publicly, because you are a remarkable person. I know you personally as well as professionally. So congratulations really on taking all these books and all your work from start to finish. Let's talk about IBM and the Holocaust. So now we know what drove you to think that it's important to tell that story. Can you dive into it just a little bit for the people watching? IBM and the Holocaust, what were the most important lessons that you learned?
One of the lessons that I learned is that I jumpstart my investigation when I first hear the word no. That's the time to intensify. I was looking into what IBM did during World War II and the run up to the war during the Hitler regime, and after an exhaustive international investigation, I was able to prove that IBM knowingly and under the micromanagement of its war criminal president Thomas J. Watson organized consciously all 6 phases of the Holocaust: the identification of the Jews, their expulsion from society, the confiscation of their assets, ghettoization, the deportation, and even the extermination of the Jews. There was an IBM customer site in every concentration camp. This began in the first moments of the Hitler regime in 1933 and continued to the last gasp of the Third Reich in May of 1945 in Berlin. Many people did not think it possible for IBM to be such a pivotal culprit because the computer was not invented. What most people don't understand is that for virtually a half a century before the war concluded, IBM was the manufacturer and processor of IBM Hollerith punch cards. In fact, it was IBM that invented information technology, and the information age was actually not conceived in Silicon Valley. It was conceived in Berlin in 1933 with these punch cards, each about the size of a dollar bill. And many in our generation know what a punch card is, but many of the younger generation do not. It was basically a cardboard card, and depending upon where you punched a hole in the rows and columns, you could then read that and determine any information about a person, a place. You could actually do anything that a computer could do, but slower. It would take perhaps 64,000 cards per hour to get the information that you wanted. But it was IBM that invented the racial census, identifying where all the Jews were in Germany, what their professions were, what language they spoke, where to pick them up. That was the identification of the Jews. Then came the expulsion. Those lists, which were created after IBM personally or corporately conducted a national census, that was then put against all the faculty list, the Bar Association, the Medical Association, the Manufacturers Association. All those Jews were expelled. That was phase 2. Phase 3, the Jews had all their bank accounts confiscated or marginalized until they could be incrementally pauperized, and that's because all the banks and financial institutions ran on IBM punch cards. Step 4, one day, all the Jews on one side of town in their comfortable middle-class homes are moved over to a slum, 8 families to an apartment. Everybody knows their street. Everybody knows the address. Everybody knows the stairway. Everybody knows the floor. All done in one day. Very well organized. That was the beauty of IBM traffic management. And that brings us to the trains. The trains were all in Europe, were all running on IBM punch cards, and whether that they were controlled out of a station in Krakow, 40 minutes from Auschwitz, or throughout Nazified Europe, the trains were being run by IBM punch cards. It was their biggest business. And finally, extermination. The Auschwitz tattoo began as an IBM number until it was subsumed by many other numbering systems. And of course, it was IBM that invented the extermination by labor campaign. IBM did this, they did it consciously, it was directed at the top. And IBM attorneys, if you're listening, I'm here for you. That's IBM and the Holocaust.
Edwin, it's probably for some people very shocking to hear you say all of this, and you say they did it consciously. Was there ever any response from them when the book was published? Did they ever explain themselves? Did they say they didn't know?
The book came out simultaneously in 40 countries on February 11th, 2001, simultaneously adjusted for time zone. So it became impossible for IBM to stop the book. They actually never commented except for a small release in which they said, we're the information company, but we just have no information on this topic. They have not really augmented that by much. And many Jewish leaders, many academic leaders, many church leaders, politicians, individuals of all stripes have asked IBM to explain themselves, and they have been quiet. And I want you to understand, Roz, that even though I've been on your show and I've just accused IBM of the conscious involvement in genocide of 6 million Jews, tomorrow morning, you will not receive a letter from IBM attorneys. They will say nothing. They will just hope that no one remembers what is said at this time. But that's not the reality. People have remembered, and they continue to study the book, to expand the information base. There are scores of editions. The book just came out in Chinese and won the China Human Rights Book Award, and IBM is just hoping that we will forget, but we will not. And I should add, they have now chosen to name their game show and their solution to running the world in terms of artificial intelligence after this psychopathic war criminal who was their president, Thomas J. Watson. He was a convicted extortionist before he ever got to IBM. He was convicted in the famous National Cash Register case. So IBM has not said anything, but as you know, I've been around the world lecturing about this. The book is discussed and studied every hour of every day.
So I guess it's simplistic, but I have to ask it. Why? Why do you think, what did you conclude was the backdrop, the reason that they were so complicit, not only complicit, but enabled so much death and destruction, such a target of the Jewish people? Why?
Right, they enabled it. That's the important thing to understand. There always would have been a Holocaust without IBM. As you know, there was the Holocaust by bullets. The Jews were lined up in pits and shot. But the industrial Holocaust, the Holocaust of the dramatic numbers, this is the IBM Hollerith Holocaust. And it comes down to one thing. Business was their middle name. International business machines. It was never about the Nazism. It was never about the anti-Semitism. It was always about the money.
Murder and money. Money and murder. I mean,
Murder as a means to money. And I should say that because Thomas J. Watson, right now they're pulling down statues for people who have shown bias and prejudice, and yet they've got Watson being advertised day and night. Thomas J. Watson was a sociopath. He was a convicted extortionist, as I mentioned to you. And as a sociopath, you know, if you're colorblind, you can't tell red from green. And if you're tone deaf, you can't tell one note from another. If you're a sociopath, you can't tell the difference between good and bad, between right and wrong, between morality and evil. And that is Thomas J. Watson. And he had hypnotized the company itself into following him. In fact, in the Nazi realm, it was Brown and the Fuhrer. And in the IBM realm, it was Blue, and they called him the leader. In point of fact, Watson went to Berlin in 1937. He was actually a frequent visitor to his many branches and operations in Europe and Germany. And in 1937, he received a special award for service given to the Third Reich. And it had special swastikas and an eagle on it, and it was a sash. And he attended by leading the international commerce, the international manufacturing group and commercial group. He led a bureau there, and it was he who pumped his arm into a Heil Hitler modality at the great event when he was honored.
So very shocking and disturbing, and kind of turns my stomach. But when I think of sociopath, by the way, I think of a person that has no appropriate guilt. Let me ask you this final question on IBM and the Holocaust. There were other companies, other collaborators. Can you give us a brief, just some insight into some of the other collaborators that people would be shocked about?
Yes, there were many who were trading with the enemy. There were department stores in Britain that sold uniforms, but the Germans had figured out the secrets of needle and thread. There were oil companies like Standard Oil who were selling petroleum products, but the Germans had their own artificial petroleum and, of course, worked with the Romanian oil fields. But there were 5 key American corporations that were pivotal and made all the difference. First was the Ford Motor Company. And the Ford Motor Company, in addition to Henry Ford himself, the Ford Motor Company was involved in giving inspiration to the Third Reich. It was Henry Ford who established this international Jewish conspiracy in the Dearborn Independent, who translated all of this and distributed it throughout the world, throughout the United States. And this included the Ford Motor Company dealerships. And so they were giving out the Protocols of the Elders of Zion. They were giving out the Dearborn Independent. And he would say, these products are as much part of the Ford Motor Company as our buses and our trucks and our cars. So yes, this is our product. And Henry Ford also went and got a special award from Hitler. The first copy of Mein Kampf, many of those, the first edition rather, had a picture of Henry Ford in it. And there was even a passage referring to Henry Ford as a great man. That was changed after Henry Ford buckled under the strength of the anti-Jewish boycott. Also, Ford maintained an important slave labor factory in Nazi Europe. The second was, of course, the Rockefeller Institution, the Rockefeller Foundation and the Carnegie Institution, both of those. And it was the Carnegie Institution that invented the concept or helped invent the concept and proliferate the concept of eugenics, which led to the concept of a master race, that white, blonde, blue-eyed individuals were intended to inherit mankind and all others should be destroyed. And the Rockefeller Foundation added to that, and to that end, even financed the program that sent Mengele to Auschwitz. The fourth major entity to work with the Nazis was General Motors. General Motors has made the Blitz truck for the Blitzkrieg. They made torpedo warheads, landmines. They worked on the Ju-88 bomber. They did this through a facade company that they took over called Opel. Opel appeared as though it was doing it, but it was all controlled by Detroit. And they also got a special award from Adolf Hitler. There was no Holocaust on horseback. No Holocaust on horseback. So it was General Motors that delivered hell on earth from land, sea, and air. And then finally, we have IBM, because you say, where did Hitler get the names? And he got the names from IBM. And with those names, they took it step by step by step as IBM co-planned and co-organized all 6 phases of the Holocaust that I've just described to you.
I imagine the book is still in print and that people can order it on Amazon, or where should they order it?
Anyone can order it from Barnes & Noble, from Amazon, anywhere on planet Earth in 190 countries. And it is not a single comma has been challenged by IBM, and nor will they challenge it tomorrow morning when they see this, and I'm sure that they will.
I'm sure it gave great comfort to the Nazis that they had such collaboration going on here in the United States and abroad. Does make you ill. But that aside, your work is incredible. Once again, congratulations to you for everything you've done for the world and to bring understanding to these issues. Thank you so much for joining us today on Standing with Israel, and we hope you'll be back again soon. Edwin, will you join me again soon?
Yes, I will, and thank you very much for having me.
Okay, next time we'll do another one of your great books. Thank you, Edwin. And thank you all for joining us on Standing with Israel.
מתי יבוא שלום